Hello, everybody. So, week 10 of this, I think, I'm not sure if I'm counting right, but I did not think we would be in this for so long. But I should not be complaining. And if you listen to the story carefully, you'll find out why. Because we have a great example in the Bible that will help us to understand why we should be really thankful for a lot of things and not complaining at all. So remember last week we started the story of Joseph in the Old Testament at the very beginning of the Bible. Genesis 39 to be exact. So last time we found out that Joseph was his dad's favorite son. So he had 11 other brothers, but Joseph was the one that his dad liked the most. And we said that was a little bit difficult. Joseph got this beautiful coat from his dad because he was the favorite son. Also, Joseph had a couple of dreams that he shared with his brother foolishly. He told them that he had this dream where all the brothers and even the mom and the dad bowed down to him. So the brothers did not like that very much. So they decided to kill him. But in the end, they kind of thought about it again and said, maybe we shouldn't kill him. Maybe we should just sell him. And fortunately, these people were just passing by from one place to Egypt. They were called Ishmaelites. And they said, well, let's just ask them if they want to buy Joseph. And, well, they did. They really bought Joseph. So the brothers quickly took his nice, beautiful robe and drenched it in blood and then brought it home to his dad, their dad, so the dad would think that Joseph was dead and not just disappeared. All good. Now Joseph is on his way to from Israel to Egypt with these people, Ishmaelites. So now I want you to close your eyes and imagine that trip. Who was there? How were they traveling? What were they wearing? What were they thinking? So close your eyes and tell me, what do you see? Do you see any animals? I think we talked last time about animals, about camels. So the purpose of their trip was to bring goods, especially spices, to Israel. Oh, I said Israel again. I meant Egypt. I'm sorry. Egypt, of course. So they loaded up their camels and they were on their way. So how many camels do you think they had? 5, 10? What do you imagine? I don't know. I can't tell you because the Bible doesn't tell us. So we have to imagine all this. So maybe, let's say 8 camels? Maybe I'm totally wrong. I don't know. But I imagine in my mind, it's 8 camels. And then how many people? Like 1 person for each camel, maybe? Or 2? I'm not sure. Where were the people? Were they sitting on the camels riding them? Or were they walking beside them? So here in our picture, the guy is walking beside the camel because he loaded his camel too much. He couldn't even sit on it. So he was walking beside it. And where was Joseph? Was he riding a camel or was he walking? Well, Joseph was sold as a slave, so he wasn't worth anything. If these guys are not riding, Joseph is probably not riding either. He is walking. I imagine that he's walking at the very back. He's probably tied to a camel with a rope so he wouldn't escape. And he's probably walking in his sandals and, yeah, not very comfortable. And what was he wearing? Well, Joseph was not wearing his beautiful coat anymore, so he was probably just wearing what he had underneath because his brothers took his coat. See, the other people are wearing long robes here, beautiful robes and head coverings. Yes, so, and they were walking along. Do you think they were walking like one camel behind the other one, or were they working side by side? What do you think? I think they were walking in a line, in a straight line. I don't know why, but I'm thinking that. And again, the Bible doesn't tell us. So if yours are walking side by side, that's okay too. because back then they didn't really have roads. So it's not like they had to be on the side to let cars by. No, they could walk wherever. So what was the landscape like? Like the surroundings? Were there trees like here in Prince George, like a forest? Or do you think it was something else? Well, I can't tell you exactly, but I know that it was not like Prince George. They were not walking through forests. I think, but that's just me again, I think they were walking in a deserty type of place. I've never been to Israel or Egypt, but I kind of imagine that there's not a lot of trees growing, not a lot of rivers flowing. I just kind of imagine sandy type of desert, or maybe rocks, maybe little hills. That's what I imagine. So anyway, now we got that picture. I hope everybody has their own picture now. Now, what do you think Joseph was feeling? Was he angry at his brothers that they sold him? Was he disappointed that they did that to him? Was he sad? Mad? Or do you think he thought, well, actually, I do deserve it because I bragged about my dreams. I bragged that I would be one day kind of like a king and everybody else is bowing to me. And I was wearing that coat that my dad gave me very proudly. So maybe I just deserved it. What do you think he was feeling? How would you be feeling? I think I would probably be rather disappointed. But we also know that Joseph made the best of it. We don't know it exactly from the traveling thing that we are imagining right now, but later on, he really tried to make the best out of it. He was in this situation and he couldn't change it, so he said, okay, let's make the best. So he probably just marched with them, maybe not feeling too happy, but anyway, they got there. They got to Egypt. And guess what? Those Ishmaelites, they said, well, we don't really need this boy anymore. What should we do with him? So they sold him, and they sold him to Potiphar. So now we're in Egypt. Now the people are dressed like this. Of course, not everybody is dressed like this. Whoops, can you see that? But Potiphar was a pretty important person. If you ever have you ever heard of a pharaoh? The pharaoh was the king in Egypt, and he looked about the same. He would look very similar to him, but maybe even a little bit more elaborate. And so this guy was an official of the pharaoh, of the king. So he was pretty high in ranking in Egypt. He owned a lot of land, he owned a nice house, he had a wife, he had servants. So he was doing really well. So he bought Joseph. And now Joseph was his slave. So yeah, he was just sold like an object. Not doesn't sound like a person, but yeah, back then people were sold as slaves. So now Joseph did not have any rights right now. He always had to do what his owner told him to do. And Joseph did. And Potiphar realized that whatever Joseph did for him, it worked out so well. And Potiphar noticed that it was because God was with Joseph. And everything he did was just perfect. It was great. So Potiphar just let him do. He knew if I just leave Joseph, he'll do great and he'll be good for me. He'll do the best. And so he didn't have to worry about anything anymore. And that was good. And Joseph was probably enjoying that, and that God was with him and everything. That was great. But one day, or maybe not just one day, but Potiphar's wife really liked Joseph, and she tried to get closer and closer to him. And Joseph one day said to her, oh, you know what? Your husband, he trusts me with everything, but you are not mine. So you are his wife and not my wife. So I need to stay away from you. Social distancing. That's what Joseph said. No, no, no. That's not right. So Potiphar's wife, unfortunately, didn't think so. So she tried to get closer and closer to Joseph again. And one day, she managed to grab his coat And poor Joseph, all he could do was wiggle out of his coat and run. So he ran away, and Potiphar's wife was standing there with his coat. Well, Potiphar's wife was not very nice. In fact, she was very, very malicious. So she said to her husband, she said, "Hey, Potiphar, look at this. This is Joseph's coat. You know how I got it? He tried to come close to me, and only when I screamed and he dropped his coat and he ran after I screamed." So that's turning the story totally around, right? Because that's not at all what happened. It happened the other way around, that Joseph ran because she got close to him, not because he got close to her. And she screamed. She did not scream at all. So that was very, very mean of her. And unfortunately, Joseph never got to tell his story. And well, Potiphar would believe his wife anyway, so he believed her. And what do you think happened to Joseph? Yes, he was thrown into prison. Now, God was with him the whole time. And then we are kind of asking the question, well, how can God be with him? So he was not wrong at all. He was right the whole time. He did the right thing, and he was thrown in prison. God, where are you? Why don't you save Joseph? He is following you. You are with him. And then this. He does only the right things, and now he's in prison? That doesn't seem right. But God was with him in prison too. So now imagine what happened in prison. Where was he? Close your eyes and imagine the cell that he was in. Do you think he was alone or with other people? Was it dark? Was it bright? Was it cold? Was it warm? Was it like the floor? Was it nice carpeted, or was there cement or dirt? Did they have beds, or did they have to sleep on the floor? So I think you can imagine pretty much the worst, probably. We don't know exactly, again, what it was like, but prisons are never nice, and especially back then, they were really bad. But one thing we know is that Joseph was not by himself in the prison cell, because he was able to talk to other people, and then the prison wards, they really liked him because Joseph helped them, and he actually ran the prison for them. So he must have had contact with other people, so it was maybe not quite as bad as you could imagine. Um, but yeah, the prison guards, they really liked him, and they knew they could trust him. So like Potiphar, they didn't have to worry about things anymore. They knew that Joseph was in charge and that he would run the whole prison. But he was still himself a prisoner. He could never get out. He still had to sleep there and and be with the other prisoners. But God was with him, and everything he did worked well. So we see that God is with Joseph even in prison, and he let it happen. He let Joseph be thrown into prison, although God knew exactly that Joseph did the right thing. So now if we're thinking about us and we're complaining about these times that we can't see our friends and we can't go camping or we can't travel, some of you maybe not be even able to see their grandparents and all this stuff. We're complaining. But don't forget, God is with us through the whole thing. God did not abandon us when COVID started. No, he let it happen. He allowed it to happen, but he is with us all the way through. And for Joseph, if you listen to the next stories after this one, you will find out that yes, God is definitely with him all the way through. And it's going to be a magnificent ending, very, very spectacular ending. So maybe our ending will be really great too. So we just don't know yet. And Joseph at that time in prison, he probably wasn't thinking that God is doing something great. And maybe God is doing something great for us right now. We don't know what. But so we should be thankful for all the things we have. Okay, so you can be thankful that you have grandparents, and that one day you'll see them again, that you have friends, and one day, hopefully very soon, you'll see your friends again, and we can travel again, and we can go back to school if you go to school. yes, so we should be very thankful for all the things we have, and that we know that God is with us, even though we don't always think God is with us and we think that God has abandoned us, but God never abandons us. So keep praying, keep talking to God, keep telling Him things that you like and that you don't like. Thank Him for things. So that's for this week. Be thankful and know that God is with us. See you next week.